This week on Arizona Illustrated, carbon-14, the nuclear isotope.
I find these cases are difficult if you have family yourself, if you have children yourself, thinking about what these losses mean.
The demonstration garden.
Assess where the saguaro is going to get the biggest blast.
Performance art in the Biosphere lung.
I don't use my words, I use my body. It's who I am and how I'm able to express myself.
And from far afield, She-Phi. Welcome to Arizona Illustrated. I'm Tom McNamara. Tucked away in his lab on the University of Arizona campus, archaeological scientist Greg Hodgins helps solve unsolved mysteries. All of this by measuring an element called carbon-14. It resides in every living thing, including you and me. Now, the element lingers in our bones and teeth and in tree rings for so long, it's become a reliable marker for determining age, and more often than not, how long ago something died.
What we do touches on so many aspects of the world around us. People learn about radiocarbon dating very early on. I think I probably heard about it in high school chemistry. It's such a fundamentally important technique for the understanding of the history of humanity and the history of the Earth over the last 50,000 years. How does radiocarbon dating work? It is a dating method that uses radioactive decay as a clock. All living things have traces of radioactive elements in them. In particular, a form of radioactive carbon. Carbon-14 is generated in the upper atmosphere. There are energetic particles that fly through space, and the origin of those particles are supernova explosions and star formation and these very distant things that give off energetic particles. As the Earth travels through space, those things strike the Earth's atmosphere, and those particles have enough energy that they can damage the atoms in the Earth's atmosphere. And one of the reactions that happens is nitrogen-14 gets converted to carbon-14.
Carbon-14 is found along with the normal carbon atoms throughout nature. All plants, during the process of photosynthesis, take in water and carbon dioxide, along with tiny quantities of the radioactive carbon-14.
So they get labeled with this radioactive carbon, and then animals eat plants. It makes its way up through the food chain. So all of life contains these traces of carbon-14, and life in the past contained similar levels of carbon-14 during their lifetimes. Carbon-14 dating is based on the fact that as long as you're living, you're replenishing that in your tissues. But once you die, the amount of C14 in them is reduced at this very predictable rate. It's the decay rate of carbon-14. One way to describe it is its half-life. Its half-life is 5,730 years, and that means that whatever amount of C14 you have now, after 5,700 years, you'll have half as much. After another 5,700 years, you'll have half as much again. If you pull an organic remain out of the ground, you bring it to our laboratory, we measure how much C14 is left, and then knowing the simple mathematical equation, we back calculate how much time must have passed until it had the same amount as living things. Most of the work that we do in this laboratory is dealing with old objects, if you like archaeological or geological samples, that the amount of C14 in them is a consequence of these natural processes, radioactive decay and aging. Another aspect is that we actually measure the amount of C14 within the last 60 years, and those materials have extra C14 in them. When nuclear weapons were being developed in the 1940s and the 1950s, they were tested in the atmosphere. So you have these intense nuclear reactions that are taking place in the mushroom cloud. And those are shooting off energetic particles into the atmosphere around them. And those had enough energy when they collided with the Earth's atmosphere that they generated carbon-14. And by 1963, the levels shot up to nearly twice the natural level. They stopped in 1963 above ground nuclear testing. They moved the testing underground so it wasn't affecting the atmosphere anymore. So there has been this really dramatic change from 1955 shooting up to 63 and then coming back down, and we're almost at natural levels now. So that is a completely different kind of clock for dating things.
Well, these are cryo pumps, so it's a different type of pumping?
In natural dating, the resolution of a radiocarbon measurement, it's probably plus or minus a century. If you're looking at dating within the time period of this bomb spike, the resolution of dating is of the order, conservatively, plus or minus a year, or plus or minus 2 years. So that is an entirely new application for what we do, and it has uses in the food industry, it has uses in authentication of works of art, it has uses in forensic science.
Hi, Simon.
Can you hear me, Vanessa?
I can hear you, yes. And can you hear me, Simon?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good.
Stand by and rolling.
We're, of course, talking about the case of the missing teenager, Shafiq Vishram. You covered his case for many years, I believe. Could you tell me, who was Shafiq Vishram?
Shafiq Vishram was a 19-year-old boy. He went to a local high school, South Carleton High School. It's a very large school in a sort of rural area. Manotick is a village on the outskirts of Ottawa. By all accounts, he was a pretty normal kid. You know, photographs of him show him looking pretty happy. You know, his family described him as, you know, just a typical kid.
And what happened on May 30th, 1994?
May 30th, 1994, Shafiq Vishram basically vanished into thin air.
It is known that at the time he disappeared, Shafiq Vishram was very worried about writing a school exam because he'd neglected to study for it. At first, police suspected this would turn out to be a case of teenage suicide. Now they don't know what to suspect.
It's just something that stuck in my head, you know, just how did this happen? The police really, over the years, had nothing to say about it until quite recently, that's for sure.
We were asked to date some human remains that were found at a housing site outside of Ottawa, Ontario. The family moved in, they had problems with their septic tank, they called the contractor, they started digging up, and what came out was a vertebra, a skull fragment, a rib, and a jaw fragment with just a few teeth in it. So the forensic anthropologists asked if we could help out. So they sent us 2 teeth from this jaw fragment. And we measured the bomb carbon in 2 of them that formed at different time periods, and we were able to give them a year of birth window of 1973 plus or minus 1 year. We don't really know the circumstances for many of these cases, even when we make positive identifications. So in the case of Shafiq Vishram, we identified his birth year. That led to the identification of his body, but the circumstances of his death are still completely unclear.
I just spoke to the police a couple of days ago. It is considered a cold case. but it is still very much an open case, and it is in the hands of the Ottawa Police Major Crimes Unit, a unit that would be the unit that would investigate murder.
It's actually very emotional really talking about this, because most of my career we're dealing with the long dead. I find these cases are difficult if you have family yourself, if you have children yourself, thinking about what these losses mean.
Each day, thousands of people drive by the U of A farm property on Campbell Avenue, just south of the Rito River in Tucson, without realizing what's really going on there. You might be surprised. This is the demonstration garden.
We are at the Cooperative Extension Office in Tucson, Arizona, and these are the Master Gardener demonstration gardens. Broke up into 14 different themed gardens within the property here. We have gardens that focus on roses, cactus and succulent, xeriscape, shade, basin edibles. We have a propagation area and beyond. We are adjacent to Campbell Avenue, just south of the Rito River here. A lot of times I tell people we are across the street from the Trader Joe's, and they go, oh, yeah. I think when I first came here, it unfortunately seemed to feel like a research facility or something as you drive by, but that's not the case. These gardens are free and open to the public during daylight hours, like a public park would be. So not only can you come and learn something here, but you can also just hang out and enjoy the surroundings with your family.
Assess where the saguaro is going to get the biggest blast.
It is a volunteer-run operation. We could not exist without the donation of time and expertise from hundreds of people every year. We have 14 different outreach programs in addition to these gardens that need to be maintained on a weekly basis. It ends up being a lot of work. We're a big organization, and we need those master gardeners to get things done.
Hello. Hi, Angie. Hi, how are you?
Okay, sweetie, how you doing?
Angela Powers, she's one of my favorite master gardener volunteers. Angela holds the title of the longest serving master gardener in our program. She came to us in 1990 and is still here helping us reach the public today.
I'm 83 years old, going in 84. I went to see my daughter today at the physical, and he says, I'm perfect. So as long as he said that I'm perfect, I continue. Well, the favorite is roses. Why? Because I love to work with roses. They talk to me. I can see if they need some help, believe it or not. You see when they are droopy, and you can see how to perk the roses. When they need to be trimmed, when maybe they had aphids, maybe they had different kind of disease. So you look for the stuff, what you see in the roses.
The Rose Garden was established by Lauren Kattenbach, a longtime master gardener. Unfortunately, we lost Lauren in 2018. The garden features 40 different varieties of roses there. Some of those plants are 25 years old. They are in very prolific bloom right now. It's really remarkable. The gardens here are an outreach effort by the Pima County Master Gardeners for the community. I like to kind of phrase it that way because sometimes people think that these gardens exist for the master gardeners to be learning in. That's not the case. You know, we want people to come here and take a look and see what we're doing and know that everything that we do here is based on research from the University of Arizona and other institutions, and so that if they like what they see, they can try it in their backyard.
It's personal satisfaction. So this is another extension of the creativity that one has in their soul, and it helps you to release it. I love working with people, sharing my knowledge with them, and also creating beautiful things.
The flowers, just you come here, you forget about what is going on everywhere. This is different. This is something that you enjoy doing. I always say the plants talk to you. If you let them, they will talk to you.
You can learn more about the demonstration garden in person. Volunteers run free tours on Wednesdays and Saturdays beginning at 9 a.m. No reservations are required.
Like what you see on Arizona Illustrated? Visit our webpage at azpm.org to watch and share stories from this and previous episodes. And like us on Facebook, where you can watch stories, comment, and share your own story ideas. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram, where we share photos and links about the show and what's happening in our community.
The famed Biosphere II is a scientific research center located in Oracle, Arizona. It was designed to emulate the Earth's environment. Inside sit two large geodesic domes that contain the biosphere's lung, huge compression chambers that regulate the air pressure inside the enclosure. Dancer and choreographer Nathaniel Myers and musician Karima Walker recently reimagined this space with their performance installation, DIOSCURI.
It feels like you're walking down into the earth. It's very cave-like and subterranean. The entry is so striking.
Virtually everyone who goes into the lung is just overwhelmed at the uniqueness, and it really looks like something from Area 51. Originally designed as an integral part of Biosphere II, it's designed to compensate for changes in pressure inside this massive structure. Without them, the windows would explode outward as it heated up inside, or conversely, as it cooled and it cooled too quickly, they could implode inward. So these were critically important from an engineering perspective.
I was lucky enough to have my first choreographic experience under Artifact Dance Project. Jory Hancock, Dean of the College of Dance here at the U of A, he saw my work, and afterwards he was like, hey, you should perform this at the Biosphere. And I was like, oh, okay.
We're really excited to bring a couple of former graduate students from the University of Arizona Fine Arts College of Dance here to Biosphere II to utilize the lung as a unique venue for their performance.
Me and Karima were able to go on a tour and visit the space, and like our eyes widened. We were kind of speechless and dumbfounded, like, how do you utilize this space? It's such an opportunity. How do you live up to that opportunity?
The most striking thing to me initially was the acoustics. Different sounds get carried in really unusual ways. The delay is like 10 to 12 seconds long.
It's a demanding space. The ceiling is a variable. Once the temperature drops, it will all of a sudden start collapsing on you. And we experienced that once during rehearsals, and we're like, oh, it's now 5 feet from our head instead of 65 feet.
I was really interested to see how we were going to work with the floor, which moves when you walk on it, the ceiling, which comes all the way down to the ground. And it's such a huge space, and I knew that the cast was so small.
He asked me to make something that was beat-driven, which I had never done before. That's not how I compose or arrange. Knowing that every hard hit that happens in that space is going to basically ping-pong delay off of all of these round surfaces. I knew that I'd have to test a lot in this space, and I knew that the arrangement would have to be pretty spare. This idea of like playing an organ, that's like essentially what was happening when I'm sending this vocal signal out around the left side of the room, and then it comes back into my mic and starts feeding back. Like the whole room starts playing. It's like being inside of an instrument.
Definitely very different from anything that I've danced to, because she creates music, but to me it's also more like a soundscape.
For my set in the first half of the whole piece, I treated that as a chance to experiment and feel the acoustics of the space the way that I maybe more naturally would.
We're recording the Catalina Mountains, and that is then projected into this makeshift Biosphere II, creating that inception type effect of the biosphere and deconstructing all of these layers within the production. DIOSCURI is the unified name of Castor and Pollux in classical antiquity, and that's what Zeus would call upon them. So I was looking at a lot of classical antiquity for the movement and the subtle poses and the contrapposto stance and everything like that.
For me, it's the purest form of self. It's who I am and how I'm able to express myself. I don't use my words, I use my body. Nate's work is very broken down, really small gestural movement that as a dancer you feel super exposed because everything is so precise. When you're doing such broken down movement, you want to understand like why you're doing this, especially with Nate's piece. Like, why am I doing this sort of movement that's so basic but has so much intention?
Working with Karima with sound, you have this push and pull effect that you can have with the mover and the sound. It can be with or against it. A self-divide goes in this way. Their oscillating relationship comes into play here. And these coexisting halves, how can they benefit and what do they take away from each other? That came into play a lot.
Not just the lung, but the whole project is fascinating. It's such a metaphorically rich space, and we've only like scratched the surface of it. And in terms of bringing the arts and humanities into conversation with the research that's happening there, it's such a fertile place for that. I hope they do more.
Start this conversation maybe across colleges. Just basic approach to putting on a production is so different from an artistic need to what the science needs.
We get nearly 100,000 visitors to Biosphere II, and finding unique ways to connect with this audience, to bring the science to them, is key for us. Having a fine arts performance where you bring the arts and the sciences together is really unique, and again, allows us to connect to another audience.
We got the opposite exchange of pressure. Patty.
And now from our Far Afield series, this is She-Phi, the all-girl step group from Holiday Magnet Elementary School in Tucson.
S is for sophistication.
The H is for humanity.
The E for our education.
And the Phi is willing to go above and beyond all walks of life to be successful.
This is why I chose She-Phi. All right now.
Thank you for joining us here on Arizona Illustrated. Here's a sneak peek at a story we're working on.
With this van here and Cope having their own transportation, we never had any problems with being picked up or taken home. And then in the middle of October, Bell called us up and said, no more, we're not riding this van anymore. So a lot of people are being ignored.
I'm Tom McNamara. See you then.